Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Trolleyheim with your host, Rabbi Anibal. Happy Hanukkah, everyone. Chag Sameach. Great to see you already in the chat. Look, I'm wearing my Hanukkah T-shirt. Hopefully, gonna wear it again on Saturday. Of course, I'm gonna wash it first. But I'm sorry about the mess in my office. I have my office packed with gear, with electronics, just because we have the Dor Hadash choir on Saturday morning. And unfortunately, because of the blizzard here in Winnipeg, we are not going to be able to rehearse today. So I'm preparing everything here in my office. Has to be ready so Marvin can connect everything, and you know what it is. Brenda, night shirt. Yeah, I doubt you saw my shorts. It's a shirt. Yes. Welcome, Ariel Lee. Welcome to the class as well. So yeah, it's Hanukkah, but we studied about Hanukkah last Saturday. Um, well, I did. We had not the Torah Lechaim, but the Lechai, how you call it? The Kiddush Club, where I taught about Hanukkah. So I hope you had a chance to catch up that one. Otherwise, it's on our YouTube and Facebook channels. You can catch the class there. So I wanted to dedicate a little bit of time talking about this week Parsha that, sometimes because Miketz is on Hanukkah, sometimes I don't get the opportunity to teach much about the Parsha. So I want to talk a little bit about the content of this week Parsha. And if we have a little bit of time at the end, I may or may not talk a little bit more about Hanukkah. Okay? David said, based upon the weather radar, it looks like the snow has at least stopped in Winnipeg. Yeah, that's correct. There is a little bit of wind outside. To be honest, I drove. This morning. Everybody was saying in the chat, "Oh, brave rabbi," and all that. It wasn't that bad. Probably because of the neighborhood where I live. It's the suburbs, and I don't have to take any highway or any street that goes over 50 kilometers an hour, and everybody was going 30 anyway. So 30 kilometers, not miles, for all of you in the States that you would say, oh, 30 kilometers an hour is pretty slow. It took me like a little longer to come here, but it was fine. It was totally fine. Of course, I have an all-wheel drive SUV, so that helps a lot. But again, I've seen all the cars and nobody got stuck or anything. Wasn't so bad. Hopefully, by the time that I go home, it's going to be fine too. Okay, welcome, Judy. I just saw your name. So, yeah, and I hope the city of Winnipeg is being clearing the streets. So, if the city deployed their trucks to clean up, it may be better. Brenda said, hope it's not electric. What do you mean, hope it's not electric? I have an electric car, and it works perfectly. I have a fancy charger at home. So it's pretty good. It's pretty good. I mean, it start getting complicated if you're going to go out of town. Then it makes me a little anxious. So I won't use it for that. But for the city drive, all-wheel drive, electric SUV, whew, it's incredible. It's incredible. Okay. And I will wait just 2 more minutes to see who else is joining the party here. And then we are going to dive into this week's Parsha. Yeah. I said, not bad. We had one person in the minyan this morning, and he walked to the synagogue. That was brave, to walk on a blizzard. Whew! I felt safe inside my car, but to walk, wow, I don't know if I would be able to do that. Yeah. See all my equipment. Can you see all the antennas here? They're all the receivers. This system can accommodate up to 16 microphones simultaneously. So it's great for big wires. They can all hold their own microphone and they can mix their voices. Like Brenda said, so severe cold doesn't affect it? No, not at all. Severe cold has nothing. It doesn't affect the electric vehicles because I think it has a system where it's using the battery, its own battery, to keep it warm. So technically, I don't even have to, during the day, how I don't know, I know Texas is different, but in Winnipeg, people who come to the office, they plug the car to the wall. If you take these employee parking spots, they have a plug, so you can warm your car while you work here. The I don't have to do that with electric. You don't have to plug it. In fact, if I plug it, it won't do anything because it's a weird system with electricity that is alternating between vehicles. Long story short, I don't have to do that. Yeah. Brenda, looking forward to hear Or Hadash. Yes, and you know that I'm finishing a video with Or Hadash. It's a Hanukkah video, but we have so many difficulties to practice and technical difficulties that I hope I can finish it before the end of Hanukkah. Oof, I've been working all morning until the beginning of Torah L'chaim, and after we finish the class, I will try to finish. And there are still 2 more kids that they need to record their part. So I'm a little nervous, but we are going to make it happen. Okay? Okay. So let's do this. Let's study. Parsha, Miketz. Why it's called Miketz? Because that's the second word. The Parsha is Vayehi Miketz, Shnatayin Yamim, Ufaro Cholem Vehine Omed Ala Yeor. Okay? Now, what the Parsha is talking about here is, remember, the last week's Parsha, we finished with Joseph in jail. Why was he in jail? Because he was accused of having an affair. No, actually, not even with having an affair, with attempt rape of Potiphar's wife. I mean, it was beyond an affair. It was like he trying to assault her. And it was a false accusation from her because he wanted to have something with Joseph. Joseph said no. But nevertheless, he was accused, he was thrown to jail. And that's the way, that, at the end of the Parsha, Joseph was still in jail. Now what happened is Pharaoh is going to have his famous dream. The dream where he was dreaming about the fat cows and the thin cows, the 7 years, and then eventually we know that Joseph is going to interpret that dream, and that is going to thrust Joseph into the next level, right? He's going to go from the back to the front like this overnight. In fact, the Torah, that's why I always recommend guys to read the whole paragraph. Of course, I present you with selected verses, but if you read the whole story, you can start imagining. And the Torah is presenting all this, the way how Joseph went from the jail to become the viceroy of Egypt. Go and read it and feel the pace of that. How the Torah is trying to make a point of your destiny can change in an instant. In this case, for the better. Joseph was in jail, and not just in jail, in an Egyptian jail, and it was forgotten. Nobody remembered that he was in jail, because remember back in the day. Hi, Holly, welcome to the class. Back in the day, and this is something that sometimes is good to remember. Back in the day, jails were not what they are now. What do I mean with that? In this day and age, after a trial, somebody could be sent to jail for multiple years as part of the punishment. So, for example, you go to jail, the judge will say 30 years in jail. And that's the punishment, 30 years in jail. But back in the day, the days of Joseph, jails were not a punishment. Jail were a place to keep people before the trial. And this is happening also in the Parsha when the last week's Parsha, you will see that 2 people were in jail with Joseph. One was the Pharaoh's butler, and the other one was Pharaoh's baker, right? And then they were in jail with Joseph because they were awaiting trial. And when the trial happened, what happened? The butler was innocent. He went back to work. Now the baker was guilty. He was killed. So that's it. Jail was a place to keep the people who were awaiting for a trial until the trial comes. After the trial, you will get your punishment or not. You may go free, if walk free if you're innocent, but the punishment would be death or could be lashes. And that's it. That's it. There was nothing else. So jail was not a punishment. Okay? So, hey, Galia, you made it. You were able to figure out how to do it. I'm glad. And yeah, you're the one. I was telling people that somebody walked to the synagogue this morning, and I said, that's brave. I came with a cart. That's not brave at all, right? But you, Galia, you walked. Whew, that's brave. That's brave. So, back here, Joseph was thrown to jail because he was accused of trying to rape Potiphar's wife, and then the trial never came. So they basically forgot that Joseph was in jail. And I'm wondering if there were other people like that in Egypt or in other places in the old days, that somebody will be there forever. Nobody remember why they were there, and you cannot let them go because the judge didn't give you an order. So, Joseph. So, what it says here, now that Joseph ended up in jail, it says, at the end of 2 years, Pharaoh had a dream, and he was standing beside the Nile River. So why am I highlighting that at the end of 2 years? Because it's not clear what 2 years. Let me explain. And, Rabbi Abraham ben Meir Ibn Ezra, also called Ibn Ezra, says the following. Scripture does not indicate the point from which these 2 years are reckoned. And it came to pass at the end of 40 years, for example, in the book of Samuel, and within 65 years in the book of Isaiah, and now it came to pass in this 30th year, Ezekiel, etc. In all these verses, Scripture doesn't indicate the point from which the reckoning starts. Okay? So they are similar. However, it is possible that Scripture's point of reckoning is the chief butler's relief from prison or the day that Joseph was put into prison. So it means that it's not uncommon in the Torah that the Torah doesn't say what is the beginning of the counting. Okay, even Ezra will give a few other examples. But here, now, even Ezra is trying to guess. Because basically what happened is that when the Torah doesn't tell you what is the beginning, the starting point for the counting, it means that you can figure that out. But in this case, there are 2 milestones in the story of Joseph that could be the beginning of the counting. Number 1, we are counting 2 years from the time that he was thrown to jail. It means from the day where he was accused of trying to rape Potiphar's wife. And then from there, 2 years later, Pharaoh had a dream. But also, even Ezra says here, and I believe that as we are going to see later on, some other rabbis agree that maybe Pharaoh had a dream 2 years after the butler was freed from prison. Okay? Why is that? To let us know that after Joseph held, because what happened is Joseph predicted that through dreams, because both the butler and the baker, they had dreams. And Joseph interpreted those dreams and said to the baker, you're going to put to death. And he said to the butler, you're going to be free. And then that's exactly what happened. So the butler went back to palace to work for Pharaoh. So maybe what the Torah is saying here, even if after Joseph interpreted those dreams, he still had to wait another 2 years in jail. And this is very important, and you will see in a minute why. Okay? Now, why is this so important? Because listen what happened. And I will read this text and then hopefully it will be clear. God's method of applying reward and punishment cannot be compared to any human system of doing so. And this is very important. Because I don't know if you ever thought about that. I believe every human being at one point reflect on these things. How does God decide how to reward or punish a person? Right? Based on what? Based on what kind of good action, bad actions, something that you did now, you did before, something you said, who knows? God has a very specific way of of punishing and rewarding people. So what the rabbi is with with this text is saying is we have to be very careful trying to use human logic to try to understand God's ways of rewarding or punishing. What so? Listen to this. Human beings inflict wounds with a chisel, a metal and pain-causing instrument, while they apply only a flimsy plaster to heal the wound. God inflicts a wound that is superficial, like the application of a plaster, but when it comes to healing it, he uses immediately effective means. Joseph had been thrown into a pit on account of a mere dream he had dreamt concerning his brothers. He was healed by a dream dreamt by the then most powerful ruler on earth, the king of Egypt. In other words, God employed the heavy weight on earth in order to heal his wounds. The remedy God used to heal Joseph consists of part of the weapon used to harm him. Why is that? Because remember that everything started with a dream, right? Because Joseph told his brothers the contents of his own dreams. Remember the sun, the moon, and the stars bowing down to him. That was the beginning of all troubles for Joseph. And he was a simple peasant. And the brothers were, shepherds. And they put him on a pit. But then the one who brought salvation to Joseph was Pharaoh. It was like a big thing. When God wants to make it clear that God is involved, God has a very special way to do it. And in the story of Joseph, is the thing that happened, it was to make it clear that God is involved in the life of Joseph. So, this is for us to understand how salvation came. But, listen to this. According to the Midrashic approach in Tanhuma Miketz, the wording of the Torah here may teach us the following. The words at the end of 2 years are a reminder of Job 28:3. God set bounds for darkness. To every limit man prose, to rocks its deepest darkness. What does it mean? Let me make it clear here so we can understand the word. Sometimes the rabbis are a little cryptic. This interpretation of Rabbi Bechaya ben Asher ibn Alawa was that the words at the end of 2 years meant that God already had in mind, before everything happened, how long Joseph was going to be in jail. And it was something of a master plan that we still don't understand, but hopefully we will by the end of the class. We will understand why the 2 years, but it was something that was unrelated to any event that happened before or during the jail time. Okay? So God decided, so we said at the end of 2 years, he's talking about God now. At the end of the 2 years decided by God, at the time that God sent this, I guess we could call it punishment for some reason, but it wasn't just punishment, it was a lesson. At the end of this lesson that God had prepared for Joseph. So those were the 2 years. So nothing to do with the time in jail, nothing to do with the butler, was the 2 years that God has decided that is going to be enough for Joseph to learn a very valuable lesson for the future. I hope you follow. I hope you follow what I'm saying here. If you have any questions, let me know in the chat because I see the chat is a little quiet now. So I want to know what you think so far about this because it's going to start getting more interesting after this. with more things about Joseph's, how you call it, attitude. Joseph attitude. You will see what I'm talking about. Let's see. Oh, by the way, no coffee today. I had the coffee before the class and I didn't want to make another one. If you don't believe me, I can show you my empty cup. It was delicious, but I had it before the class started. Okay, so let's continue. Now, listen to this. Lori said, 2 is gematria of division. Interesting. Interesting. But 2 is also material world, right? 1 is God, 2 is material world. But I don't want to go back there. We studied that when we studied Parshat on Bereshit, on Genesis. But it's, yeah, it's like that. Okay, so let's continue. Let's read the comment of the Maharzu. Here he is quoting the book of Proverbs into something very important. Proverbs says, "V'chol etzev yeh motar u'devar sfatayim al lemachzor." He said, "In all work there is profit, but mere talk produces only poverty." Now, this sentence of Proverbs is a gem. It's great, right? It's, in other words, you have to work hard to get something. If all you do is talk all day, you're never going to achieve anything. We're in this world to do. So go and do what you're supposed to do and not just talk about that. Beautiful. But what this rabbi is saying is taking the word usually translated as work, the word etzev, and he noticed that the word etzev could also mean mourning or worry. And he gives an example in the second book of Samuel 19:13. That's the context, and that's the way it's used. Thus, the verse alludes to the fact that Joseph gained through his difficulties. So, in other words, we are learning here, as Rabbi is implying, that all those years in jail and all the difficult years in jail that Joseph has to go through, they were part of a process. Not much different, except that shorter in time, of what is going to happen with Joseph's descendants once they were enslaved in Egypt. Same thing. That process in Egypt was, according to the rabbis, necessary for a collective learning of something. The way they needed to connect to God and to realize of God's presence, the whole process of slavery was necessary. It was a way to purify them. It's like the rabbis say, it's like purifying metals through fire. You need to use fire to release all the impurities from the metal. And that is true for gold, for example. If you have pure gold, you need to use fire. So something like that is the interpretation of Egypt. But the rabbis are saying something very similar that happened with Joseph in jail. Those 2 years that God decided that he was going to be there, it was something for him that through discomfort, he was going to learn a valuable lesson. So it's interesting because by translating etzev here as difficulty, so you will read in English, in all difficulty there is profit, but mere talk produces only poverty, which is not much different what people say in this generation. Have you ever heard the expression, no pain, no gain? Well, this is one of the ways that you can interpret this verse from Proverbs. No pain, no difficulties, no gain, no profit. Think about that. Proverbs already said it many centuries ago, and it's true of life. So there was something for Joseph to learn in jail. Now, you see, this is the the verse of Samuel that the rabbi was quoting. I want to read it for you. Thus the victory that day was turned into mourning for all the people. For the people heard it said that the day that the king was grieving for his son. So that's how the rabbi made a connection and to offer an alternative translation from the word etzev, right? Very important. Now, we have to try to understand now how those 2 years were somehow beneficial for Joseph. Okay? How? One interpretation, as the Midrash Rabbah says, why was it beneficial? Because as a result of that suffering, he took his daughter as a wife, the daughter of Potiphar. So this is one interpretation, that after Joseph was released from jail, he was named the Viceroy of Egypt, and part of the quote-unquote perks of being the Viceroy of Egypt was to marry into some kind of case of royalty. So who was the wife that it was chosen? Was Potiphar's daughter. Potiphar's daughter, that it was Potiphar, remember, he was a very important authority in Egypt. So that's what it seems like it was a big deal for Joseph to marry his daughter after. So because as a result of the suffering, he took his daughter as a wife. But on account of that which Joseph said to the chamberlain of the cupbearers, 2 years were added for him to his incarceration. So this is very interesting now, because the same text in Midrash Rabbah said that it was a reward for everything what he learned in jail. So, okay. But at the other time, all those 2 years, according to Midrash Rabbah, were added because of something Joseph said that he shouldn't have said. Something that when he said it, it showed that he still had a flaw that has to be corrected because he qualified for the next stage of his life, which I guess God already knew that it was going to be, to become the Viceroy of Egypt. And you see, now we can see the master plan a little bit. And why it was so important for Joseph to become the Viceroy of Egypt? Because God already knew that it's going to be 7 years of abundance followed by 7 years of misery and drought and all that. So it was very important for Joseph to be ready to take that position, to become the administrator of Egypt, to save all those lives from famine. So, but let's go back. What is that Joseph said to the chamberlain of the cupbearer, so in other words, the butler? What is that he said to him that added as a punishment 2 years to his incarceration? And I'm asking you guys, what do you think it was? I will leave a minute for you to think. What do you think it was that he said that added to the punishment? Any clues? Any ideas? Nothing? Nope. Okay, listen to this. This is very interesting. Very interesting. Let's read again what he said. Maybe now you can understand. First, I've got zips at Shelley. Okay. First, let me read the verse where it says that that Joseph got this super special wife. Okay? Genesis 41:45. It said, Pharaoh called Joseph by the name Safnap Paneach, that is the new Egyptian name it was assigned to him, and gave him his wife, Osnat, the daughter of Potipharah, priest of On. Then Joseph went out through all the land of Egypt. So it doesn't say Potipharah, it says Potipharah, daughter of Potipharah. And from there, the rabbis connected that was Potiphar, was the same person, but it said that it was a priest. This person said it was a very important one, perfect for the new status, the new royal status of Joseph. But the other verse of what Joseph said to the butler is Genesis 40:14. Listen to them. But remember me when it goes well with you. Because remember, Joseph said to the butler, you're going to leave. It's okay. You're going to be judged and you're innocent. I learned that from your dream. So you're going to be fine. Go sleep tight. Don't worry. And then Joseph said, believe me, it's going to happen. Okay? So when it happens, now go to the verse. When it happens, remember me and show me kindness, please, and mention me to Pharaoh so that he will release me from prison. So now it's not implying that he's not implying that go tell Pharaoh that I can read dreams, that I can interpret dreams. Because remember what I told you before, that the biggest issue here is that Joseph was forgotten in jail. Joseph is saying to the butler, when you go out, don't do what the other did. Please remember me and tell Pharaoh that here I am, still waiting for trial, for a fair trial. I didn't do anything. They accuse me of this nonsense thing with Potiphar's wife. So please tell Pharaoh so maybe he will do something to get me out of here, because all I need is a fair trial because I am innocent. Okay? So, according to the rabbis, because of that verse, Genesis 40:14, at that point, when Joseph said that, 2 years were added to his incarceration. Why is that? Let's get to it. Listen to this. Listen to this. Rabbi Chaim Brisker posed the following question to a young student of his, the future famed Rabbi Shimon Shkop. Had Joseph made only one request from the chamberlain of the cupbearers, how many years will have been added to his term in prison? So in other words here, what happened is, well, maybe because he made 2 requests to the cupbearers, remember me, and also said, please tell Pharaoh about my situation, 2 requests, 2 years were added to his incarceration, because maybe by asking those 2 things to a person, Joseph was showing a lack of faith. Okay? He wasn't trusting God, he was trying to put the trust on a human being. So 2 requests, 2 years. This is the debate that these rabbis are having here. Okay? So, if for 2 requests were 2 years, how many years would have been added to his term in prison if it was only 1 request? Let's play math here. Let's see. Rabbi Shimon answered that since 2 requests were punishable with 2 years of imprisonment, it follows that for 1 request Joseph would have been liable for 1 year. Rabbi Chaim disagreed. Rather, had Joseph made only 1 request, he would have not been liable at all. Nothing will have been added to his term of imprisonment. Why? Let's see. Rabbi Chaim based his assertion on the explanation of his father. Joseph was punished for excessive reliance on the chamberlain. It is possible that such excess was expressed only in his double request. Had he made only a single request of the chamberlain, it might have been deemed good and proper, and he would not have been punished at all. But he had slipped from his pinnacle of emunah, of faith, and he was thus punished for both requests. So, what happened here? Judaism will never ask from us to never involve other people in solving our problems. In fact, it's good. That's what we do in life, right? But the problem here, and what we are trying to learn from the story of Joseph and the 2 years that they were added, is for us to develop a trait of trusting too much or exclusively on people, and then to have expectations on people. Can you imagine poor Joseph? He just helped this cupbearer, or what do you call it, butler. I like to call it butler. He just helped him. The guy went out, right? And then one week goes by, 1 month, 1 year. Can you imagine the feeling of Joseph, the disappointment of Joseph, and all the anguish that that brings? And that is because we make too much expectations on people, and that gets us into trouble and depression and anxieties, because we depend on that sense. It's not that it's wrong to depend on people, but it's wrong, I guess, to have too much high expectations, and that when the expectations are not met, that is a really bad thing. So what this story is trying to teach us is, doing what we have to do is fine, but to a certain limit, and that's what happened with Joseph here. So how he said to the butler, when you get out of here, just remember me, okay? Okay, good. Have a good day. Hope to see you soon. That's it. But it was, oh, please go talk to Pharaoh, please, I beg you. Lack of emunah. One request would have been enough. And then, so what happened is, one of the things that Joseph was going to need for the rest of his mission on earth was to strengthen that faith in God. And because he still had that flaw, and Joseph was so important in God's master plan, according to the rabbis, 2 years were added to his imprisonment so he can still learn that lesson. Okay? And then the one who wrote extensively about emunah and faith was Rabbi Nachman of Breslov. Listen what he had to say. We must all make an ongoing effort to observe the divine wisdom in everything and to connect ourselves to the divine wisdom in everything. When we do, the divine wisdom of a particular creation or event illuminates our brains and soul, drawing us closer to God. But the one who neither observes nor connects himself to the divine wisdom of a particular creation or event resembles Esau, who scorned the birthright. In other words, Esau had the birthright in front of him. It was in front of him, literally. And he was not able to see the big picture of how that birthright fit into the future. Because Esau said, why do I need the birthright now? I'm young. I'm active. He didn't see it in the long term. He was like, immediate gratification, and that's it, Esau. What faith, the true emunah, true faith, is understanding God's master plan and how everything has a plan that involves the past, the present, and the future. That's for us to figure it out. And it's individual, it's particular. Nobody can tell you what's your path. It's your own conversation with God based on being aware of your surrounding, being aware of what happens to you, and reading that situation in the context and putting that in the context of that is part of your purpose in this world. So what happened is, the hope was that now that Joseph had to stay those 2 more years there, he will hopefully understand why he was still there. Because when he begged the butler, and then 1 day goes by, 1 week, 1 month, 1 year, nothing happened. If you were Joseph, what will be your question, your internal question? If you have the opportunity to pray to God, what will be the question to God? I will probably be, why, God, why? Why do you do that to me? And that's fair. That is the beginning of the conversation. You look up and you ask God why, and then basically it's not that God is going to answer you with a voice. You need to connect the dots to answer that question. And that's what, even though it doesn't say it in the Torah, that's what we believe Joseph did for the last 2 years. To understand that it was a lack of emunah, a lack of faith that he needed to correct. And we believe that that's exactly what happened, because after 2 years, he was released from prison. Okay? So any questions? Yeah, you say, Lori, me too. Why? And yeah, we all want to ask why, but that's okay. Some people will say, don't ask God why. And I always say, why not? Why not? When I said, you have all the right to ask God why. You have all the right to be, quote unquote, angry at God. Okay? But don't expect God to answer to you with a voice. That's happened in the movies. Right? The conversation with God is internal, and you are the one who hopefully will be granted the ability to connect the dots and to understand all the situations in your life. That is what was requested from Joseph, and we believe that Joseph was able to fulfill that. Let's continue with that. Now, listen to this, what I was mentioning before. Then Pharaoh summoned Joseph, and they brought him quickly out of the dungeon. He shaved himself, changed his clothes, and came to Pharaoh. Pharaoh said to Joseph, I had a dream, and there is no one who can interpret it. But I've heard it said about you that you hear a dream, you can interpret it. Joseph answered to Pharaoh, it isn't me. It isn't in me. God will give Pharaoh an answer that will set his mind at peace. Now, why am I bringing this? Because the rabbis understand that this is the proof that Joseph finally learned to believe in God and in God only. How so? Because if you're a person who relies on people and who try to gain favor from people, you will never talk this way to Pharaoh. Because you know that Pharaoh believes that he's God, right? And Joseph here he was in jail. He finally had the opportunity to get out of jail. They finally gave him a bath, and he was able to shave, get new clothes, right? New life. Joseph had an opportunity to play the game. But then Pharaoh said, I heard you can interpret the dreams. And then Joseph said, no, it's not me. God, meaning not you, Pharaoh, the real God. God will tell me the interpretation of the dream. Ooh, that was something that only a person with strong faith, that the person that truly trusts on God, will say to Pharaoh. Do you understand that? I hope you can see it. That this verse is proof that something changes inside Joseph. This is not the Joseph that begged the butler. Because that Joseph will say to Pharaoh, oh yeah, Pharaoh, sure, tell me the dream and I will say to you. Of course, you are Pharaoh, you are God. No, Joseph learned a lesson, and now he trusted God. He trusted in the sense that, hey, if my destiny is to make Pharaoh angry and he will throw me back into jail, let it be. But I won't play the game anymore. I will be honest, I will be myself. And that's why Joseph talks this way to Pharaoh. Very bold. I don't know what I will do in that situation. It's very difficult what he did. Very difficult. Sometimes we don't give him enough credit for the way he's talking to Pharaoh here. So listen to this. This is the Torah's lesson to us regarding the profundity of the education we receive in our formative years. Joseph was so imbued with the knowledge that God is the one who gave him the ability to interpret the dreams that he did not even consider any of the aforementioned concerns. The education which he received from his parents was such that even though he left home at 17 years of age, he held fast to their teachings. From this, we can see the deep roots which we can cultivate in children, and even the strongest winds cannot uproot. So, in other words, you can when 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 you take the time to analyze, as Joseph did, probably when he was reflecting on his life and everything that happened to him, it's interesting that that's the time where all the lessons from his parents came back to him. The lessons from Jacob, who probably talked to him about emunah, about faith, about trusting God. But sometimes that's what a dark place can do to you, like it did to Joseph, to be thrown in jail. When you're at the lowest point, we can all make the same mistake, and to believe that God had abandoned us. And that's when we start trusting people and people only. Because if God is not there, I won't trust in God anymore. And that happened to Joseph. But eventually, he went back, somehow, he went back to all the teachings that he received from Jacob during all his formative years. And all that came back to make his faith stronger than ever. Yeah. Shelley Chochin, you said, our grandparents' teachings lay the foundation of who, what we become in later life. Yes, that's why it's not uncommon that when people, young people, they go to rebel years and they leave the house and they make a mess out of their lives. Eventually, when they discover all the mistakes they're made and they want to turn their lives around, what do? They come back home. Have you ever noticed that? They come back home. And that's what Joseph did here. He went back, quote unquote, home, because physical home was impossible, but at least emotional and spiritual home. That's what he did. Yeah. And you see, and then I wanted to mention this because some people think, okay, Rabbi, if you say that his faith was different, so how can you explain this verse that Joseph said after? Because Joseph said to Pharaoh, when Pharaoh said, well, if you are telling me that we are going to have 7 years of abundance and 7 years of famine, what can I do to prevent that? Right? And now, is Joseph going back to his old being when he said to Pharaoh, well, Pharaoh, maybe you should look for a man both discreet and wise, right, to put in charge of the land of Egypt. He was selling himself here, the way he was doing it. Very interesting. So is he going back to this kind of thing, trusting people and playing the game? Is that the case? Before I go to the next slide, please let me know in the chat what you think about this. Why would Joseph say something like this if he's supposedly a different, more spiritual person? Any ideas? Okay. Let's see. It's very interesting. Listen to this. We know that Joseph did learn that God exclusively controlled the success and destiny of all world's inhabitants, as evidenced by his reply to Pharaoh's request. You see, when he said to Pharaoh, I will read this. And Pharaoh said to Joseph, I dreamed a dream, but no one can interpret it. Now I heard it said that you comprehend the dream to interpret it. Joseph answered Pharaoh, saying, that is beyond me. It is God, the real God, who will respond with Pharaoh's welfare. Indeed, but stating so unequivocally that he played no active role in the deciphering of the dreams, he completely undermined the misconception that you comprehend the dream to interpret it, likely destroying his last opportunity to ever be released from prison. By doing so, demonstrated the completeness of his dependence on a divine resolution to his crisis, negating all reliance on his own actions. Working within this mindset, Joseph's suggestion to Pharaoh regarding the viceroy did not constitute a breach. A lack of faith is not demonstrated by a particular action, but by the mindset behind that action. Giving Pharaoh the opportunity to release him while maintaining a complete unswavering reliance on divine kindness is indeed the embodiment of exhibiting faith in God. Yeah, he was promoting himself because from a place of faith and humility, he knew that because remember that how I mentioned that he now understands a little bit better God's master plan? Because he probably still remembers his dream from the past, his brothers bowing down to him, right? So, and all that. So now by saying, hey, Pharaoh, I think I'm the right person from the place. That is not lack of faith or not even arrogance. It's simply stating facts based on his understanding on his divine purpose. He was understanding that, and that's a very interesting thing, right? So there is no contradiction of that. The spiritual person is not somebody somebody detached from the reality. Now, those are the texts that I wanted to share with you, but there's something else that I wanted to mention because we are going to go into 2 weeks hiatus now because of winter breaks here. Schools are closed, so the virtual school of Torah L'Chaim is going to be closed as well. So for the next 2 weeks, we are not going to have our meetings, guys. But I wanted to mention that eventually what happened is that the dream that Pharaoh had came to happen, right? 7 years of abundance, 7 years of famine. And during the 7 years of abundance, thanks to Joseph, Egypt was able to save food to feed the entire Middle East, basically, during the years of famine. And Egypt became the only provider of food. So people from all over the map were coming to Egypt to buy food, and they were paying first with money, then with land titles, etc. It was a very interesting strategy. So eventually what happened, one of these people coming to buy food were Joseph's brothers. And then eventually they bowed down to him. So you will say that the original dream that Joseph had of the sun, the moon, and the stars bowing down to him came to happen. Even though the dream did happen, what also happened is that they all got it wrong. The interpretation of the dream was wrong. I would say that part of this emuna process of the extra 2 years in jail was also good for Joseph to understand that he got it wrong. Because Joseph thought, and that's how he told the dream to his brothers, and that's why he got into trouble, right? He was sold as a slave, etc. He thought that he came to this world, that Joseph came to this world, so other people can bow down and serve to him. It's not uncommon. It's not uncommon to go through the world thinking that other people are there to serve you, that you are the center of attention and people should bow down to you and serve you. So what happened at the end is, even though Jacob and the other sons and Joseph's brothers did bow down to him. They didn't bow down to him to serve him. They came to Joseph so Joseph can serve them. So it did happen that they came to Egypt, but the reason they got it all wrong was nothing to do with Joseph being served, because at the end he became powerful, not to be honored, but to serve others. Oh, you know what? I think I'm going to talk about this. This is probably going to be my sermon tomorrow. Yeah, I like the topic. I like the topic. Yes, it's people thinking that others should serve you, and then at the end you realize that your mission is you being the one serving others. I think it's one of the highest things in life to realize that's why we come to the world, right? To give the best to others and not to expect the best of others to us. It is what it is. Okay, so yeah, thank you everyone for tuning in. Thank you so much, and happy Hanukkah to all of you. Fourth day of Hanukkah. Remember tonight, five candles. And also remember, this class is going to be rebroadcast at 8 p.m. Central Time. Okay, if you missed it, you can catch it again. And remember, 5:30 p.m. is the Mincha /Mariv service here at the Shari Zedek tonight. And I hope you can make it and you can be part of the minyan. If not, there's always the online version. So thank you so much, everyone. Remember, Dor Hadash is coming Saturday morning to sing at Shari Zedek. Also, it's Ruach Choir. So it's going to be a very special Hanukkah Shabbat this coming Saturday at Shari Zedek. You don't want to miss that one. Okay? Trust me. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Be blessed. Chag Sameach. Stay safe. Hope to see you soon. Bye, everyone.